Hello. Olive trees or olive plants, and I've called this video Olive Tree Rescue for a very specific reason. And I've got 6 olive trees. These are the 2 most recent additions to my collection. I've been looking after 4 much larger standard lollipop olive trees for the last 5 years, and they're doing incredibly well in a long scented Mediterranean style border up the side of my cottage. And I love olive trees because olive trees are so evocative of the Mediterranean, and I've had many happy holidays in the Mediterranean, and these trees always make me think of those wonderful holidays in the sun. But I wish I could say that these 2 olive trees looked as happy as I feel, because unfortunately they don't. They're both in a bit of a sorry state, and I've just bought these from Morrison's supermarket. I think I got a bit of a bargain because these were originally priced at £17 each, and they were both reduced to £7.65 each. So that's nearly £10 off the price of each one. And whilst these look a little bit worse for wear, I'm not worried, because everything I see on these 2 olive plants I've seen before, and I know it's completely recoverable. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to use these 2 olive trees as a case study. I'm going to look in depth at each plant and diagnose what could be going wrong with them, and then I'm going to take steps to put that right. And if you come back to me in 6 months' time, I can guarantee that these 2 plants will be lovely, healthy, round lollipop bushes. There's another reason why I wanted to do this video, because I had an email last week from a lady called Rosie in Somerset, and her son has just inherited an olive plant under quite sad circumstances. And of course that olive tree now has sentimental value, and it's important that we help Rosie help that tree to survive. So everything I tell you in this video, Rosie, is applicable to you and your new olive tree. So let's get started and have a look at these 2 olive trees and try and understand why they're not looking at their best, and then let's put it right. So the first thing is, let me lift one up. That's not been watered for a couple of days, but despite the fact that it's not been watered for a few days, that feels like a heavy lump of concrete. It really is straining my arm as I lift it. I could use these 2 as dumbbells. So to me, that suggests that it is in a pot of highly compacted soil. Let's have a look. It is, it's dry, it's compacted. It's pot bound actually, I can see the roots. I'll bring the camera a little bit closer in so that you can see too. So here we have a dense, solid mass of soil. It feels quite clayey. It's not particularly well drained, and it's quite heavy. And look, it is pot bound. The roots have reached the extent of the pot that it was in. So I think we've got to this in the nick of time. One of the problems with having dense compacted soil around a plant's roots is it stops oxygen getting to the roots. Plants do need oxygen at the roots. Some plants need more oxygen than others. If a plant enjoys well-drained soil, it suggests it needs more oxygen. Now I've located myself quite close to 2 other types of plant, a colocasia and a hydrangea. They don't need as much oxygen, so they don't need as free draining soil. But here we are, as we tease away at this very compacted root ball, we can see that probably very little oxygen was getting to the centre here. So already, by undressing these roots, I'm going to help this plant to survive. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to plunge that in some water and just get it rehydrated before I repot it. But I mustn't leave it in the water for too long, because I don't want to drown the poor thing. So anyway, these roots, quite recoverable. Some of them do seem a little bit dead, but inside there, yes, I can see as I cut through with a Stanley knife, there's fresh life in there. So these roots are not all dead. And I'm pretty sure if I do the same to the other one, I will find exactly the same thing. Yes, it's as I thought. All this soil that I tease away is going to be replaced by fresh compost, but we are going to take steps to ensure that that fresh compost is well drained. by damaging some of these roots, I will stimulate them into growth. So I'm not concerned about the fact that there are some roots being torn off here in this earth. Being in a plastic pot does not help with drainage because it's not permeable. That's why I'm going to be repotting these into terracotta, which breathes better. So what do we see? Well, the first thing I can see is that the leaves seem to be covered in dust. Now, how can a plant breathe if its leaves and its pores are all chock full of dust? The other thing I can see, which is quite encouraging, there's quite a lot of new growth on here. Here, there's a little baby olive, clearly from last year. It produces blossom on last year's growth, so that's why if you prune it too close back, you won't get blossom and therefore you won't get fruit. Similarly, on this one, lots of new little fresh leaves coming to the surface. So I think that confirms that neither of these two olive trees are actually dead. But there is something else I can do to confirm whether or not it's dead, and that's just to cut in across one of the branches, and I can see inside there very, very green tissue. There's lots of life in these stems, and that life must be coming up from the roots. I'm going to clean these leaves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take them out of this water, and I'm going to invert the plant completely and plunge the head of the plant in the water and just give it a little bit of an agitate, and that will clean all that dust off those leaves. It's a bit of a shake, and already I'm seeing lots of lovely clean green leaves. I'll just give the second a bit of a wash. This looks dramatic, but I promise you it's doing the plant a world of good. I'm agitating the leaves and washing off any dust, and also washing off any powdery mildew that may be in existence. And when it dries out and it gets new soil around its roots, it'll be fighting fit. Amazing how a little bit of water on a leaf just makes it look so much healthier. Now, I've already told you that these plants like drainage, so I'm going to show you next what we do to improve the drainage. Hydrangea, in fact Hydrangea Annabelle, loves wet feet. Think of its name, Hydra, which is like water, hydration. That loves wet feet. And over there in that border, Colocasia, a bog plant, effectively a swamp plant. You couldn't overwater that. But these, if they don't have good drainage, they will suffer. So we're now going to plant these into two breathable terracotta pots, and we're going to take steps to ensure that they've got great drainage. There's our hole in the bottom of our pot. Soil on top of it would just compact and block the hole. So we put crocks over the hole, which allows water through but stops the water from bringing the soil with it. So there we are. I've put crocks over that plant pot hole. I'm going to take an additional step here. I'm going to apply a layer of gravel. Now, all that does is, again, it acts as a kind of filter. It filters out the soil, it lets the water through. So we've got a lovely, well-drained pot here. Now, I'm going to do that with both of these pots before I plant into them. So let's get these two little olive plants into their new home. Now, I'm just going to use standard multi-purpose compost. We'll just put some compost in the bottom. The objective is not to bury it any deeper than it was originally buried, and also to leave an inch or so at the top, which you can fill with more gravel. I'll come back to the gravel on the top in a minute. Let's just get some compost in. Obviously, I want these to be centered as well, so I'll just take some time now, some care to get these planted in. Just check it's vertical. A good idea when you've got a standard plant like this to make sure it is vertical is not look at it too close up. Take a step back and have a look at it from several different angles, and that way you are assured that it is vertical. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a gravel mulch on the top. Why am I applying a gravel mulch? Well, there's several reasons. The first one, it will help retain moisture in the soil. Secondly, aesthetically, it looks nicer. Thirdly, it stops weeds from germinating in the soil. Weeds are competition for the plant. It's true to say that weeds will compete with this plant and take the nutrients out of the soil, so it doesn't want any weeds around its base. There's now a good inch of gravel around the top of that plant. Now, just to reiterate, I did not plant soil right up to the surface, because the way you water these is you almost let them dry out between watering, and then you give them a good soaking. And by leaving a gap at the top of the pot, it allows you to really soak the soil. If you fill it right up to the top, the water you put on top just runs off. That gravel will aid with that watering process. There's one done. I'm not going to water it yet. I'm just going to set it to one side and do the second. So there we go. 2 little olive trees in their wonderful new homes. I'm just giving them a good soak, and you can see the fact that I've not overfilled these pots allows me to really drench the top, and that water will be soaking through to the roots, and those roots will be making contact with fresh compost, and soon they will sprout into life. Now let's talk about pruning, and I think pruning is one of the areas where people feel a little bit nervous when it comes to olive plants. And I've done a whole video on pruning olives, so I'll just give you a bit of a summary. I think people feel anxious because these are seen somewhat as a slightly exotic plant and tender and fragile. But let's face it, some of these plants live to 400 years old and more in their native country. Any plant that can live that long has got to be reasonably tough. So my message is, if you want to prune your olive, don't be scared of it. I pruned 2 of mine in March. I took 2/3 of the growth off, and now they're rewarding me with thousands of beautiful little green leaves, and you'll be looking at them now as I speak to you, because I'll do a little cutaway. But back to these 2. These 2, I'm going to give, don't be alarmed, I'm going to give them a really severe haircut. And unfortunately, I've just broken my secateurs, so I'm going to make the cardinal sin of using the kitchen scissors. And I'm going to prune these into a very tight ball, almost the size of a grapefruit. And if you come back in 2 or 3 weeks, you'll see the results, because the results will be pretty impressive. Let's just go in and let's just take a lot of the growth out. And what you can also do when you're pruning olives is prune into the centre, because where there is light, it will grow. So don't be afraid to go into the middle and cut away at some of the branches that erupt from the inside. And if you prune it into a kind of an open bowl shape, like an uplifted hand like that, light can get into it and cause it to grow. So there we are. I'm just going at it and I'm just chopping away. And I promise you, and it looks aggressive and it looks alarming, and I promise you, in a couple of weeks' time, everywhere where I've cut, just below it, there will be new growth and new leaves. It looks a little bit silly, a little bit daft. I have to confess, I look a little bit silly and a little bit daft sometimes when I've had a haircut, but when it grows back, it always looks better than it did before. So let's go in. Another thing that this will do, it will redress the balance between the root and the plant. The root has got to support the plant. If there's too much plant for the root, there's an imbalance. I'm reducing the plant to root ratio. These roots will recover, and that will come back twice as strong. I'm now going to remove these reduced labels from the plant, but I'm going to keep them because there are some care instructions on there. That'll be a little souvenir for me, which will remind me of today's work. I'm going to move these into their new position, which is either side of my front door. I'll take them there now, and then I'll give you a bit of a summary and a recap. So there we go, olive tree rescue. 2 little cute baby standard olive lollipop trees on either side of my front door where I can look after them. And there, just to my left, is one of my other olive trees, slightly bigger, slightly more impressive, but you can see how well that's done with the same care as these are going to get. And if I were to say one thing, it would be drainage, drainage, drainage. Drainage, light and warmth. Don't overwater it. Don't overfeed it. It doesn't need it. Keep your eye on the leaves. The leaves will tell you when it's in distress. In my experience, it's normally because it's either getting too much water or it's grown to the extent of its pot and it needs repotting. A very forgiving and a very rewarding plant. I hope you've enjoyed that. Hope you found it informative. If you have, please do like it, and of course, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to comment below. It's always nice to hear from you. What's your experience of olive trees? And Rosie, if you're still watching, good luck with your plant, and I'll see you soon.